It's terrible that after 50 years, it is behind closed doors.
Queen Camilla had faced criticism, family tension, and years of public judgment, but nothing prepared her for the words placed before her that morning. Inside the palace, an official decree carried a decision powerful enough to leave her completely silent. The Privy Council had revoked one of her historic royal titles, stripping away a distinction tied to her standing beside the king. And when Camilla finally looked toward Charles, his reaction made the moment even more devastating. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla sat rigid as senior aides withdrew, leaving the paper between her and King Charles III. The Privy Council, a body of senior advisors who advise the sovereign on state matters, had issued a decree removing her historic ceremonial title with immediate effect. A decree is an official order carrying formal authority, and this one also removed the precedents, privileges, and duties attached to that designation. This was not a warning, it was done. Charles watched her read the decisive paragraph twice. She lowered the page but said nothing. The title had represented more than ceremony. It marked years of difficult acceptance inside an institution that had once doubted her position. Camilla had stood beside him through years of pressure. Now a few lines had erased part of that standing in seconds. Camilla finally looked up and asked whether he had known this was coming. Charles did not interrupt. The pause before his answer changed everything. His hesitation told her the decision had been moving through royal channels long before that morning. Without her knowledge, the decree carried another blow. It said the removal followed a formal review of royal functions, meaning officials had examined which ceremonial powers still mattered. That wording made one thing unmistakable. This had not been rushed through overnight. It had been reviewed, discussed, and allowed to advance. Camilla kept reading until one reference stopped her cold. Prince William's office had been consulted before the final recommendation was approved. His position had been sought, turning shock into suspicion. She wanted to know what he had said and whether Charles had heard his view before she ever saw the decree. Camilla placed the paper flat on the table, removed her glasses, and fixed her husband with a steady look. "How long have you known?" she asked. Charles remained still. Then she asked for the names of everyone who had approved the recommendation. The decree had taken away a title, but the greater wound was only beginning to emerge, because Camilla was about to discover exactly who had allowed it to happen. Behind the legal language were three people carrying three very different fears. Camilla saw humiliation. Charles saw a threat to the fragile balance between his marriage and the crown. William saw something else entirely: the future. What appeared to the outside world as a change in royal protocol had become a private test of loyalty inside the family. And every choice now forced one of them to decide whether protecting the monarchy meant hurting someone they loved. Camilla felt the loss more deeply than the wording suggested. The revoked designation had represented years of slow acceptance inside a royal structure that had once treated her place with caution. It was not simply ceremonial recognition, it was proof that she had moved from outsider to central figure. William, meanwhile, stood as heir to the throne, the person expected to inherit the crown and increasingly help shape a smaller, more controlled monarchy. For him, every ceremonial role carried consequences far beyond the present reign. Charles remained alone after she left. He turned the decree over in his hands but did not read it again. The king understood why his wife felt wounded, yet he also knew the Privy Council recommendation could not be dismissed like an uncomfortable family argument. Challenging it would mean using his authority openly to defend a privilege attached to Camilla. That choice could protect her dignity, but it could also make the monarchy look unwilling to reform itself. William received the message only minutes later. Camilla knew his office had been consulted. His expression tightened because the prince immediately understood what that meant. The next conversation would not be about procedure. It would be about whether she believed he had helped push her aside. Then a briefing note sharpened the tension. According to the documented internal account prepared for the royal household, William had not initiated the review. He had never demanded the title be removed. But when officials asked whether the designation remained necessary for the future monarchy, he refused to oppose its removal. That silence carried enormous weight, because the future king's opinion could influence how officials viewed the institution after Charles. Camilla learned something even more painful from the same documented account. Charles had been told that stopping the decree would require him to challenge the council's recommendation personally. He had possessed a path to resistance, but using it would have forced him to spend royal authority defending her position. The queen consort now understood why his hesitation that morning had felt so heavy. He had not been powerless. He had faced a choice. Camilla made her own decision quickly. She requested a private meeting with William, with no Charles, no secretaries, and no advisors present. The message was short. There would be nowhere for either of them to hide behind official language. William paused outside the palace room after receiving it. He reread the message once, locked his phone, and turned toward his aide. "No one comes in with me." The prince believed this dispute had begun with a constitutional review. Camilla knew better. The real fracture stretched back further, to one royal ceremony, one private confrontation, and one moment neither of them had forgotten. The decree did not begin in a council chamber. It began months earlier, during a royal ceremony that should have passed without controversy. Instead, one small disagreement exposed a larger struggle over precedence, authority, and the shape of the monarchy after Charles. Those present remembered the moment because the atmosphere changed instantly. Camilla believed she was defending a role already granted to her. William believed an invisible line had been crossed. From that moment forward, the review was no longer theoretical. Camilla had already resisted several attempts to reduce ceremonial duties around her position. The royal household had been quietly trying to simplify offices and separate responsibilities belonging to the sovereign, the consort, and the direct heir. A consort is the spouse of the reigning monarch, while the heir is the person next in line to inherit the crown. For her, these changes were not harmless adjustments. Each removed duty risked sending a public message that her place beside Charles was becoming smaller. Then came the Windsor State Orders ceremony. The fictional event was designed to confirm a revised order of ceremonial precedence, meaning the formal ranking that decides who stands where and who performs specific royal duties. Camilla insisted that her historic title still allowed her to remain in a position now reserved for the king and direct heir. William approached her privately before the final stage and asked her to follow the new arrangement. She refused. Camilla closed the withdrawing room door after the ceremony and turned toward him without waiting for an aide. A withdrawing room is a private chamber used for brief conversations away from larger ceremonial spaces. "You do not decide when my place disappears," she told William. The prince did not move. "No," he answered, "but neither do you." Charles learned about the confrontation later through a documented household account prepared after the ceremony. The king was not disturbed because voices had been raised. He was disturbed because both sides believed they were defending him. Camilla saw herself protecting the dignity of his reign. William believed he was protecting the structure Charles would leave behind. That single clash changed everything. Senior household officials formally recorded the Windsor incident and attached it to a recommendation calling for a complete review of Camilla's disputed ceremonial designation. The review memorandum, a written summary used to examine a royal role before a decision is made, now had a specific trigger. What had once been a general discussion had become an institutional response. Camilla discovered the most painful detail only later. According to that documented account, Charles had seen the memorandum weeks before the final decree was issued. He knew the Windsor confrontation had become the point of no return, yet he never warned her. Months of buried resentment now had a name, a date, and a cause, and when Camilla finally faced William again, neither of them could hide behind ceremony. No officials stood between them. No prepared statement softened the words. When Camilla entered the room where William was waiting, the argument that had been buried beneath ceremonies and council language finally became personal. She wanted to know why he had not fought for her. William wanted her to understand why he could not. What followed was not simply a clash between queen and heir. It was a confrontation over memory, legitimacy, and the monarchy that would survive Charles. Camilla did not waste time. She asked William why his office had refused to oppose the recommendation when everyone understood how much weight his opinion carried. The prince answered that he had never possessed the power to revoke her title himself. His role had been to give the heir's assessment when the council asked whether the designation remained useful. In simple terms, that assessment was his judgment about whether the old ceremonial role still belonged in the future structure of the monarchy. William kept his voice controlled, but Camilla heard something colder beneath it. She told him that refusing to defend her was still a choice. His future position mattered because officials were already thinking beyond the current reign. If the man expected to become king would not support the title, then everyone in that process could see where the monarchy was moving. To her, neutrality felt almost identical to rejection. Camilla's anger suddenly weakened. She told William that years of service now felt disposable, reduced to a line in an official decree. Then she asked the question that had been sitting beneath every argument between them. Had he ever truly accepted her place inside the institution? The future king hesitated before answering, not because he lacked an answer, but because he knew the wrong words could turn tension into something permanent. William told her this was not about denying her place beside Charles. He said it was about preventing temporary arrangements from becoming permanent powers simply because no one wanted the discomfort of challenging them. The prince argued that succession meant more than inheriting a crown. It meant inheriting every unclear rule left behind. Then, William revealed the detail Camilla had not expected. According to the documented account of the final consultation, Charles had been given one last opportunity to request reconsideration before the decree was approved. He had been told he could challenge the recommendation and force another review. The king declined. Camilla stood before William had finished explaining. Her hand tightened around the back of the chair. He could have stopped it? William paused. He could have challenged it. That distinction changed everything. Camilla had entered the room believing the prince was the man who had taken something from her. Now she understood that Charles had been the final person with the power to resist, and he had chosen silence instead. She ended the meeting with one sentence. There was only one person she needed to hear from now. Camilla entered believing William had taken something from her. She left, realizing Charles had made the decision not to save it. Kings possess enormous symbolic power, but monarchy survives through limits as much as authority. That reality now closed around Charles. He could rage at the consequences, resent the timing, and hate what the decree was doing to his marriage. But overturning a formal recommendation carried risks of its own. The question was no longer whether Charles loved Camilla. The question was whether he would use the weight of the crown to preserve a position the royal system had decided should disappear. Charles understood that the Privy Council was no ordinary gathering. In this story, it meant the senior advisors who examined constitutional precedent, ceremonial need, and future succession before turning their conclusions into formal recommendations. The king also knew the decree was not written as a personal punishment. Its purpose was to separate Camilla's place beside him from specific institutional privileges tied to the revoked title. That distinction mattered because the monarchy could preserve her personal status while still changing the powers attached to it. Charles spoke privately with a trusted aide, after the final papers were prepared. According to the documented account of that conversation, he admitted that Camilla would experience the change as rejection, whatever the legal wording said. He also knew that challenging the decree could make the crown look as though it was protecting family privilege simply because the person affected was his wife. The choice was brutal: defend her position and risk weakening the reform, or accept the reform and wound her deeply. Charles carried that weight alone after the aide left. Constitutional restraint sounded calm on paper, but it offered no comfort to the woman who believed her husband had abandoned her. The monarch could explain precedent, procedure, and duty for hours. None of it changed the fact that Camilla had asked one simple question: why did he not fight? Then another detail emerged from the documented review record. Charles had asked whether the wording could be softened before the final decree was issued. He had tried to remove phrases that would make the decision feel final and humiliating. The council refused. Its members believed weaker language could create ambiguity and allow the old privileges to survive informally behind palace doors. Charles signed the acknowledgement of the decree and set the pen down. His hand remained pressed against the desk for several seconds before he quietly asked his private secretary to leave him alone. The king now understood that silence could no longer protect anyone. He decided he would tell Camilla himself why he had allowed the decree to proceed. But he was already too late. Camilla had begun surrendering the first symbols of the revoked role. Charles had chosen institutional certainty over intervention, and now the first visible consequences of that choice were beginning inside Camilla's own household. The cruelest part was not the announcement. It was what happened afterward. A title can disappear in a sentence, but its absence becomes real through dozens of small changes: an altered briefing list, a cancelled duty, a ceremonial object returned, a door that no longer opens automatically. For Camilla, the decree stopped being constitutional language the moment members of her household began carrying out its instructions. And one seemingly minor exchange finally broke through the controlled expression she had maintained all day. Camilla watched the changes arrive one by one. Palace staff removed her from ceremonies, briefings, and internal chains of responsibility connected directly to the revoked designation. Those chains were simply the official routes through which decisions and duties moved inside the royal household. Her position as queen remained intact in this story, but the historic title and the powers linked to it were gone. That difference mattered because she had not lost Charles, yet she had lost a visible part of the authority she had spent years building. Camilla remained composed until a longtime aide brought in the ceremonial insignia connected to her former role. An insignia is a formal badge or symbol showing that someone holds a particular office or duty. She opened the small case, touched the piece once with her thumb, then closed the lid. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she pushed it across the table herself. The gesture was quiet, but it made the decree feel more final than any official sentence had. The aide returned later with a revised diary. Several future engagements had disappeared. Camilla noticed the empty spaces immediately. The trusted staff member struggled to maintain composure and began to apologize, but she stopped the apology before it was finished. "You did not make this decision," she said. The queen consort refused to let someone else carry the guilt that belonged elsewhere. Then one entry caught her attention. A major appearance beside King Charles III remained untouched. He had specifically requested that she stay beside him, making it clear that institutional change would not become public marital separation. The message was unmistakable. The title might be gone, but he was not removing her from his side. Camilla learned something else from a documented implementation note. William had personally asked that the changes be carried out without unnecessary ceremonial humiliation. The prince had supported clarity, but not cruelty. That detail unsettled her because it complicated the anger she had carried toward him. Evening brought the confrontation she could no longer avoid. Charles entered her private sitting room alone. No aides followed. No officials waited outside to translate emotion into procedure. For the first time since the decree, neither Charles nor Camilla had anyone else to blame. The palace had completed its first acts of removal, but behind one closed door, they were finally about to confront the choice that had placed them there. For hours, Camilla had demanded answers from officials, from William, and from the decree itself. But the answer that mattered could only come from Charles. When he entered her room that night, there were no constitutional advisors beside him, and no heir waiting outside. There was only a husband, facing a wife he had knowingly allowed to be hurt. Camilla asked one question. Charles answered it without excuses. And in that private exchange, the entire meaning of the crisis began to change. Camilla did not ask him to explain the council again. She wanted the truth from the man who had seen the final review before she did. Charles admitted that he knew the recommendation was moving toward revocation, and understood what that meant. The final review was the last formal assessment before the decision advanced, and he had seen it while she was still unaware of how close the title was to disappearing. Charles told her he had considered requesting reconsideration. He could have challenged the recommendation and forced another discussion. But the king believed that using royal pressure to protect a disputed privilege connected to his wife would create a precedent William might one day inherit. A precedent is an earlier decision that can shape how future choices are judged. If he used the crown to shield Camilla now, the future king could later face pressure to protect family interests in the same way. Camilla listened, but that explanation did not remove the deepest wound. She told Charles she might have accepted losing the title if he had warned her. What she could not accept was discovering that her husband had watched the decision approach while allowing her to walk into that morning unprepared. Her anger had never been only about status. It was about trust. Charles finally stripped away every royal excuse. According to the recorded private conversation later preserved in a confidential household account, he admitted he delayed telling her because he feared the conversation. The king had faced constitutional pressure with discipline, yet he had avoided one painful exchange with his own wife. Then Charles revealed what he had done. He had insisted that the decree protect Camilla's personal dignity, her residence arrangements, her position beside him, and her standing as his wife. He had accepted the loss of institutional authority, but he had refused to let the wording turn that loss into personal rejection. Camilla looked at him for a long moment. "Did you choose this?" Charles answered quietly. "I chose not to stop it." Silence followed. Then she reached for his hand. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the first sign that the argument had changed. Camilla now understood that she had lost a formal power, not her husband's loyalty. The wound remained, but the anger began to soften into something harder and calmer. Acceptance. She made one final decision that night. She would not hide. Camilla would appear publicly beside Charles and face the reaction herself. The private battle had reached its turning point, but the monarchy could not keep the decree behind palace doors forever. By morning, the entire country would be judging what it meant. By sunrise, the decree was no longer Camilla's private humiliation. It belonged to everyone. Broadcasters interrupted their schedules. Commentators argued over precedent, and crowds gathered outside royal gates, trying to understand whether they were witnessing punishment, reform, or the beginning of a new royal order. Yet one image cut through all the analysis. Camilla appearing beside Charles only hours after losing the title, composed but unmistakably changed. The public had expected retreat. Instead, she walked directly into the judgment. Camilla woke to a country already divided over what had happened. Some saw the decision as necessary modernization, a way to make royal roles clearer for the future. Others believed the method had been unnecessarily humiliating. Palace communications moved quickly to stress continuity, meaning the monarchy wanted the public to understand that the decree had changed one historic designation without removing her from Charles's side. That distinction mattered because the institution was trying to reform itself without turning the king's marriage into a public collapse. The morning pressure intensified when the fictional newspaper The Chronicle published its front page. Title gone. Camilla faces new royal order, stretched across the page, beside an image of her leaving the palace with a controlled expression. The headline turned a complicated constitutional decision into something brutally simple. She had lost the title. Everyone knew it. And now everyone had an opinion about what that loss meant. Outside Buckingham Palace, the divide became impossible to ignore. A crowd gathered behind the barriers, with some calling out support for Camilla, while others openly applauded the reform. The Queen Consort could no longer pretend this was a private family wound. Her pain had become part of a national argument over whether monarchy should protect tradition or cut away anything that no longer served the future. William watched the coverage in silence. The prince grew visibly uncomfortable when commentators described the decree as his victory over Camilla. According to a documented private briefing account, he immediately rejected that language and told aides he had never wanted the decision framed as a personal conquest. He wanted reform, not humiliation, and he understood how quickly public storytelling could turn constitutional change into family warfare. Then, palace officials released one carefully chosen clarification. Charles, William, and Camilla would appear together at the next major engagement. The king wanted the message unmistakable. Structural change had occurred, but the family had not broken apart. Camilla arrived beside Charles and briefly turned toward William. The future king met her gaze. She gave him a restrained nod, then moved forward beside her husband, rather than behind either man. That single gesture carried the answer. The country had delivered its opinions. The institution had delivered its decree. And now only one verdict remained: the emotional meaning Camilla herself would give to what had been taken away. In the end, the decree did exactly what it promised. The title was gone. The ceremonial authority attached to it disappeared. The palace reorganized itself and moved forward. But the deeper story was never about a line of royal wording. It was about what happened when power, marriage, and succession collided, and whether the people caught inside that collision could survive it without destroying one another. Camilla lost something significant. Charles made a painful choice. William inherited the consequences. And all three emerged changed. Camilla no longer fought the decision. The decree remained fully in force, and the responsibilities tied to her historic designation were not restored, revised, or quietly returned. That mattered, because the ending was not built on a secret reversal. The Queen Consort still stood beside Charles, but her personal place as his wife was now clearly separate from the ceremonial authority she had lost. Camilla chose not to turn the rest of her role into a public battle over status. She continued with charitable duties, personal appearances, and the responsibilities that remained open to her. The Queen understood that demanding restoration would make every future moment about what had been taken away. Acceptance offered something different. It allowed her to keep moving without pretending the loss had never happened. Charles faced his own consequence. According to the documented private account of their later conversation, the king admitted that withholding the truth had damaged her trust more deeply than he expected. He did not ask her to forget it. Camilla did not pretend the wound was gone, but their reconciliation restored something the decree had threatened to destroy: honesty between them. William met with Camilla one final time before their next major appearance. The prince made clear through that recorded conversation that he had never viewed the decree as revenge. He believed the future monarchy needed clearer boundaries between family loyalty and institutional authority. She listened, then gave him a warning rather than forgiveness. One day, the future king would face choices just as painful, and duty would not protect him from the people those choices hurt. The monarchy moved forward with those boundaries now impossible to ignore. Personal affection could remain, marriage could survive, family ties could heal. But institutional authority would no longer be preserved simply because removing it was uncomfortable. Camilla paused beside Charles before their final public engagement. William approached them. No one mentioned the decree. She looked at the king, then at the prince, straightened herself, and moved forward with both men. Her silence at the beginning had represented shock. Her composure now represented acceptance. The title was gone. It was not coming back. Charles remained beside her, William carried the lesson forward, and Camilla chose dignity over resistance. There was no final battle left to fight. The decree stood, the chapter closed, and the monarchy emerged changed by a painful truth. The crown could protect continuity without protecting every privilege. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.